SpaghettiOs have been around since 1965 and remain one of the best-selling canned foods in America. They're a food everyone can get nostalgic about, so pull up a beanbag, put on some classic cartoons, and grab a spoon to dig into the untold truth of SpaghettiOs. As a general rule, national tragedies aren't really something companies should be using as marketing opportunities. Yet on the 72nd anniversary of Japan's surprise attack on Pearl Harbor, the one that killed more than 2,400 Americans and launched the U.S. into World War II, Campbell's, the parent company of SpaghettiOs, decided it would be a good idea to trot out its cartoon mascot named the O on the SpaghettiOs Twitter page to encourage their canned pasta-loving followers to share the day with them. As the O gleefully hoisted an American flag in the air like an astronaut about to stab it into the moon, the tweet read, "Take a moment to remember Pearl Harbor with us." This not-so-thinly disguised attempt at self-promotion landed with a resounding thud. One Twitter user replied, "Really invokes the warfare and death of that moment." Comedian Patton Oswalt commented, "Dear SpaghettiOs, genuinely afraid to scroll back and see what you tweeted on the 50th anniversary of JFK's assassination." Realizing its mistake, Campbell's deleted it 13 hours later with this apology. "We apologize for our recent tweet in remembrance of Pearl Harbor Day. We meant to pay respect, not to offend." A 23-year-old Georgia woman named Ashley Huff went to jail just for eating SpaghettiOs. In 2014, Huff was pulled over for a routine stop when policemen came across a spoon in her car with a, quote, clear crystal-like substance on it. She claimed it was SpaghettiOs and that she had thrown away the can. The police said it was meth and hauled her off to jail. There she sat, waiting for the crime lab to test the spoon residue. But crime labs take time. 2 weeks later, they still had no answers, so they let Ashley go on the condition she regularly attended appointments made by the court. After missing one appointment, Huff ended up getting thrown back in the clink for over a month until the lab analysis finally came back showing they had found nothing but tomatoey sauce on the spoon. So what made them think it was meth? The arresting officer wrote in his report he found it strange that she would eat SpaghettiOs with a metal spoon while riding in a vehicle and then put the spoon back in a bag.
Why do I not? I don't like. There's something about this I don't like one bit.
Campbell's announced in November of 2015 that it was recalling more than 350,000 cans of SpaghettiOs. And what was in those cans? Salmonella, botulism, dead bugs? Nope. It was small bits of red plastic, which may seem relatively harmless compared to deadly bacteria, but there was a clear choking risk. In an attempt to put everyone's mind at ease, Campbell's pointed out the plastic was food grade and therefore harmless to the digestive system. But the fact remained it could get stuck in the throat of the person, most likely a child, consuming it. Luckily, it never came to that, but let it serve as a reminder to chew your SpaghettiOs well. Over the years, SpaghettiOs have come in various shapes. 90s kids might remember Teddy-Os, the SpaghettiOs with teddy bear shapes, or Sporty-Os with skateboards, roller skates, and bicycles. Whereas Waldo's had Waldo heads, hats, striped shirts, and canes. A to Z SpaghettiOs taught you the alphabet, and remarkably, the SpaghettiOs recipe stayed the same for 50 years. But in 2015, Campbell's hit the motherlode of licensing agreements and came out with a Star Wars-themed version of SpaghettiOs, and they had to change the recipe to do it. Why? Translating a character into a pasta shape isn't easy. It takes what they call pastability. And according to a representative of SpaghettiOs, C-3PO and Chewbacca don't have as distinctive facial features as the other characters, so we're not very pastable. Having a lot of lines is difficult because when pasta cooks, it swells, so the shape can be lost, making the character unrecognizable. We tweaked the pasta dough recipe and our production techniques to make sure that each character held its shape after cooking. Apparently, Campbell's worked it out, because not only did C-3PO and Chewie get the SpaghettiO treatment, so did Yoda, R2-D2, and Darth Vader. Experimenting with different food combinations is part of the fun of cooking. Everyone from 4-star chefs to curious children have mixed and matched different ingredients in the hopes of emerging with something palatable. And as fate would have it, some seemingly disgusting food combinations are actually quite amazing. Apple pie with cheddar cheese, for example. But two great tastes don't always taste great together, and Jell-O with SpaghettiOs is definitely one of them. When the recipe for this retro-themed monstrosity first appeared via shared food, it wasn't exactly well received. One commenter said, "I don't want to live on this planet anymore." Another chimed in, "I'm calling Child Protective Services on whoever posted this. This meal is child abuse." The arrangement of raw Vienna sausages in the middle certainly doesn't do it any favors either. It's like the food version of an ugly sweater contest. Thanks, but we'll pass on this one. Steve Glick, bar manager of Chicago's Lux Bar, doesn't back down from a challenge. So when he was tasked with creating a drink using SpaghettiOs as part of the Chicago Readers Cocktail Challenge series, he dug in. Not one to just throw some vodka in the can and call it a day, Steve created the Uh-Oh, a saucy spin on the Bloody Maria. At first, the thought of having to use SpaghettiOs sounded like a nightmare.
It's so processed. I mean, there's so much artificial flavor in there.
Not to mention a whole lot of pasta, which never made it into the Uh-Oh. Instead, Glick added fresh tomato juice to the SpaghettiOs can to water down the sauce, strained it, and mixed it with a little watermelon juice to temper the processed flavor. Once he added mezcal and a few other ingredients to the tomato mixture, he at least ended up with something drinkable. He used the can as a glass, along with a fresh sprig of mint, a sprinkle of paprika, and a pasta straw. Uh-Oh, SpaghettiOs is one of the catchiest slogans ever written for a TV commercial, and Campbell still uses it today. What you may not know is that it's based on a love song recorded in 1958 by teen idol Jimmie Rodgers called "Oh Oh, I'm Falling in Love Again." 7 years later, when Campbell's commissioned him to write a few words about their circular pasta, Jimmie borrowed the tune from his bouncy hit single, changed the words, and made marketing history. Jimmie Rodgers also sang the SpaghettiO song in early ads, and for years afterward, he would even close his own shows with it. Colleen Ballinger, actress and creator of the now-canceled Netflix series Haters Back Off, found out the hard way that SpaghettiOs are perhaps the grossest food to bathe in. Colleen played Miranda Sings, an appallingly obnoxious, untalented wannabe YouTube star who, during an extremely nauseating fantasy sequence, submerges herself in a bathtub full of what looks like dozens of cans worth of SpaghettiOs. Even though she wrote the segment in question, she publicly regretted it later, saying, "It wasn't my favorite part. In the writer's room, they said, 'You know, what you write, you will have to end up doing.' It was a surreal moment to be sitting in a bathtub full of SpaghettiOs and being miserable, but thinking, 'Oh my god, this is a dream come true to have this show.' One thing's for sure, the girl definitely has guts." The pasta in SpaghettiOs doesn't really taste like much, and in its original formulation, the sauce is pretty bland too, to be honest. So the powers that be decided that to keep this SpaghettiOs thing going into the next century, they would need to get clever and add a few new flavors. It's called line extending, the long-established branding strategy of switching up a product just enough so that it's still identifiable as the product, but different enough to be something new. Line extending is why we have Gummy Savers and Hershey's Chocolate Milk. In the 80s, it gave us Pizza-O's and Cheez-O's, and in 2013, bizarrely enough, Cheeseburger-O's. We shudder to think about what makes pasta and tomato sauce supposedly taste like cheeseburgers. The two have nothing to do with each other. But one YouTuber claims it almost feels like a dumbed-down SpaghettiO. Your guess is as good as ours what that means. Have you ever noticed that SpaghettiOs have a bit of a weird texture? Compare your dish of delicious O's to regular pasta, and you'll find there's definitely a little bit of gumminess going on there. If your plate of spaghetti bolognese tasted like this, you'd toss it and head off to Little Caesars. So what's the deal? According to the Washington Post, it actually has to do with how the pasta is canned. Check out the ingredient list and you'll see the first thing is water. That's because all that water is needed for the canning process. When SpaghettiOs are packed into the can, the pasta is dry. Then that very watery sauce cooks the pasta as it's being canned, and that's why it has that distinctive texture. They're cooked in the can. There's a bonus to doing it this way too. It helps infuse the flavor throughout the whole O. Now you know. SpaghettiOs might have been the best thing ever when you were a kid, but chances are good that now that you're an adult, they've become something of a guilty pleasure if you still eat them at all. But here's the weird thing, they're not nearly as bad as you're expecting them to be. A serving, which is 1 cup, has just 170 calories, 1 gram of fat, and 0.5 grams of saturated fat. SpaghettiOs actually got a 21st century makeover, and you maybe didn't even notice. In 2009, Campbell's announced it was lowering the sodium in SpaghettiOs by around 35%. Then in 2010, the company confirmed that each serving of O's contained a full serving of vegetables, as well as 5 essential nutrients including calcium and vitamin A. There's also a full serving of grains in each one of those servings.
Not bad. Not bad.
There is still a ton of sodium though, 600 milligrams per serving, so avoid if you're trying to lower your blood pressure. If you're looking for something super fun and unique for that birthday cake, or that this day was terrible, I need some cake, reach for a can of SpaghettiOs. We're not kidding. Food Beast made a SpaghettiOs cake with a box of yellow cake mix and 1 can of SpaghettiOs. While you'll have to adjust for texture and add more or less water, it can definitely be done, and it's weirdly delicious. And for SpaghettiOs' 50th birthday, Campbell's released a recipe for red velvet cupcakes that used SpaghettiOs sauce as the liquid for the cupcakes and the O's as a component in the topping, which also included strawberries and sugar. Weird? Definitely, but it's also definitely a conversation piece. According to Campbell's, the idea of a tomato-based spice cake dates back to the 1920s, and its official version, which uses Campbell's tomato soup, was first published in October 1940. By 1966, the company updated the idea to use boxed cake mixes. Using SpaghettiOs in place of the tomato soup is basically the same general idea. Think you love SpaghettiOs? Thomas Grasso certainly did. The convicted killer requested them for his last meal as he sat on death row. According to the Oklahoman, Grasso was scheduled for execution on March 20, 1995, after being found guilty of killing 2 senior citizens, one on Staten Island in New York and one in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Although originally ordered to serve a 20-year sentence in New York first, he was ultimately sent to Oklahoma and executed well before those 20 years were up. He requested a last meal of steamed mussels, a double cheeseburger from Burger King, a strawberry milkshake, pumpkin pie, a single mango, and a tin of room-temperature SpaghettiOs with meatballs. Before he died, the New York Times says he issued several messages and poems, and his last words were a complaint. "Please tell the media, I did not get my SpaghettiOs. I got spaghetti. I want the press to know this." Check out one of our newest videos right here, plus even more mashed videos about food brands are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.